Hey YouTube, this is Big Potato 5. Last week I posted a video entitled The Purpose of Life for an Atheist, which, if you haven't checked that out yet, should be a link in the description. I highly suggest that you watch that. On that video I received a comment from a user named Valu777, and for some reason it got flagged as spam, like immediately, but I think it raised a valid question, and it's a very important one, so I want to take the time to uh, respond to it in another video response. So here's what it said. There is no ultimate right or wrong in atheism. Of course, the logical result of being an atheist is that there are no moral absolutes, no such thing as right and wrong. Now, so far I agree wholeheartedly and completely with this statement, and I commend Valu for coming up with this on his own, but the second half of the comment is where we start to differ on opinions. Although some atheists have a moral code, they certainly do not have to follow any moral standard. This belief system gives the entire world a reason to act in an irresponsible and sinful manner. So let me just take a wild guess at what your stance on morality is, and I'm going to base it off of what I was told as a child in religious school. There is an ever-present, ever-knowing, and ever-powerful being who arbitrarily decrees some things are good, some things are evil, and constantly judges every action you make as if you could put it on a scale and measure how good or how bad you are by the weight of your deeds. The motivation for following this morality is reward and punishment doled out by the same being and will eventually affect you in the afterlife depending on how well or poorly you did. Now this was all fine and good when I was 5 years old, but things began to make less and less sense as reality began to kick in. Most of the commandments in the Bible seemed to either have nothing to do with what was right or wrong, such as what kind of clothes you could wear or what kind of food you could eat, or was in direct conflict with my personal sense of right and wrong, such as slavery, the treatment of women, etc. I thought about people from other cultures who had a different moral code than the one I was used to. People of other cultures ate things I would have considered taboo, like rabbits, horses, and dogs. But what is the difference between eating a dog and eating a pig besides familiarity? How can something be wrong to one person and right to another? Is this a moral dilemma? Let's take a look at that quote again. Now what we are dealing with here is called ethics, which is a branch of philosophy which concerns itself with morality. That is, what is right and what is wrong, good and evil, etc. Ethical philosophy is, of course, much older than Christianity. The oldest code of law we have is the Code of Ur-Nammu from around 2100 BC. We can also talk about Socrates, who's one of the first Greek philosophers to put a great emphasis on ethics, and he did this over 400 years before Christ. Let us not forget the philosophy arose in the Western world as an effort to explain the phenomena in the natural world by reason and rejection of mythology. The first person to do this was Thales of Miletus around 600 BC, and since then ethics has been the center of countless pieces of literature and debate, and most of it in the modern era can be explained without the use of a god. Just understand that when you tell me that you can't have a moral code without God, you must at least be aware that ethics were being discussed at least 2100 years before Christianity, and atheist or secular philosophy has been around much longer as well. I know that doesn't prove or disprove anything, but just be aware that ethics, and specifically atheist or secular ethics, have been around for much longer than any major religions of the world today. So let's take a look at that quote again. Although some atheists have a moral code, they certainly do not have to follow any moral standard. This is in fact true, but it insinuates something that isn't. While there's nothing keeping humans from doing immoral acts, we are moral and we must be moral if we wish to survive. If you remember my spiel from last video, I had a lot to say about the way the human mind works through abstractions, and the focus of that video was purpose. Well, here's another abstraction of the human mind, and it's very relevant to the topic at hand. It's good and evil. Yes, morality is an abstraction of the human mind, and it's a very useful one because we are a social species, and that's key to understanding why morals and a sense of justice are very important. You don't have to have studied evolutionary biology for a long time to understand the advantage of teamwork and strength in numbers. Your chance of survival is much greater in many situations if you have hundreds of friends and family along with you. Civilization has been the culmination of taking advantage of this strength. Certainly, civilization is able to feed us, clothe us, shelter us, keep us warm, keep us cool, protect us from sickness and heal us when we get sick, entertain us, enabling worldwide instant mass communication, to list a few of the things that we gain from it. Obviously, it is very useful for us and would be quite unfortunate if we did not have it. One thing civilization requires is a population that doesn't destroy itself. Now, this may seem fairly obvious, but it's important to note. A society functions better when the individuals care for the well-being of others. We call this trait altruism, and there's been a lot of research into how altruism arises in a population. And I'm not an expert, so I may not be able to explain the specific mechanisms of altruism. However, it's fairly easy to figure out if you just give it a little thought. Initially, it might seem a little counterintuitive to select for altruistic traits because an individual who forgoes his own survival in favor of another's doesn't get to pass on those traits. However, what you gotta realize is that evolution doesn't work on the level of an individual over the course of his lifetime. It works on the level of genetics in a population over vast expanses of time. The survival of the individual isn't as consequential as the presence of that altruistic trait and its genetic information in the population when the inevitable agent of natural selection hits. It didn't happen to a single individual over the course of a single day, it happened over billions of years, and it happened to populations. Now, with this in mind, it's actually fairly easy to see the plausibility of a population with altruistic and group-friendly traits within it to have a higher chance of survival than one that doesn't. What resulted is a natural instinct in our ancestors to preserve life within their population, and it has translated quite well into society's expectations of its individuals to behave in the interest of society. But you're still uncomfortable with this idea, I can tell. You ask, what is keeping a person from committing immoral acts? The answer is society. If a person wishes to reap the many benefits of society that I listed earlier, they must operate within the limits society provides for them, or else society will remove the individual from society. This is part of the terms for social contract theory, as postulated by Enlightenment philosophers Hobbes, Locke, and Rousseau, and is the basis for most modern political and law systems, heavily influencing the founding fathers of my own country, the United States. However, unlike natural populations, societies as we know them are self-aware, and if the rights of even a single individual are in jeopardy, the rights of every individual are in jeopardy, and society is in jeopardy. So back to that quote. This belief system gives the entire world a reason to act in an irresponsible and sinful manner. This is false. If the world wishes to see society continue to thrive and progress, the entire world will not act in an irresponsible nor sinful manner. The irresponsible thing to do would be to not evaluate what is good for an ever-changing society by assuming that morality is an unchanging entity. New moral questions arise every day, and the question is not whether or not it is right or wrong, but is it beneficial or detrimental for society? It is more difficult to view morality in this light, which is why you religious folk don't like it. It means you gotta think a little bit more. Philosophies branch off here on what exactly it means to be better for society and how to do this, but ultimately it comes down to helping the most people and hurting the least. We have a fairly bloody track record of this, and a lot of that blood is on religion's hands, but that's besides the point. If we do not learn from this and just assume morality is some stoic, unchanging thing, then we don't get anywhere, and that's why I speak out against it. Alright, well, I've spent a lot of time discussing this, and I hope it gives you something to think about. Peace, and good night.